rolling tumors to roaring lampooners, the Tigers on a Roll show starts in 3, 2, 1.
All right, Tigers fans, welcome back to another episode of Tigers on a Roll. We've got quite a bit to talk about. Shout out, I suppose, to Shadarius Tootle coming back. Don't love that he ever left. Not a huge fan right now of the NIL landscape and how it's influencing specifically Auburn's, football team. But we'll get to that because I think that is the root cause of the whole Damari Alston debacle. And today we will certainly be addressing that as one of the most confusing midseason departures in recent memory. Auburn running back and team captain Damari Alston left the program yesterday, which would have been Monday morning. Was it a disciplinary dismissal? Was it a calculated NIL move? Was it just an unfortunate misunderstanding between him and the coaches? I don't know, but I took the time as things unfolded yesterday to assess the situation. Obviously got on Twitter and read what fans thought, read what former players thought. As the news dropped, certainly unexpectedly, following weeks of rumors about coaching turmoil with Hugh Freeze, and he confirmed the speculation. The rumor mill pumped out on Monday when I think J.G. Tate brought up the rumors were swirling that DA had left the program. Damari, well, here's what I think. Everybody needs to chill out, first of all. And Hugh Freeze needs to stop talking so much. That's it. I said it on a pod the other day. Hugh Freeze needs to be a little less honest. And I'll tell you what, a coach, if he is replaced, the coach that we need to get is one that won't talk to the media, short and maybe even, forget sweet. But we do not need the exposure that we are currently getting with the state of the perceived state of the program. And Hugh said that Damari failed to meet the expectations and standards of the program. And Freeze announced at the presser, also that he still loves Damari and wishes the best for him, but that he won't be playing here anymore. That to me suggests like it was a dismissal. Does it not? It suggests that he was dismissed. I know that news outlets quickly characterized it as more or less a player firing, forced removal of Damari Alston from the program based on the way that Hugh phrased it. And you was, for a team captain in the middle of a 3-3 season, 0-3 in the SEC, but with some easier games lined up, to use the phrasing that Hugh did, that Damari, a senior captain of this team, didn't meet the standards and expectations, suggests to me a severe breach of conduct just on its face. But we have to look closer at the calendar, how the games have been going, kind of the talk around the program, whether it's in the facility or it's by fans that are on, social media expressing their discontent or what have you. And, even some of the things that Cohen has been doing or saying, I think this whole thing's coming to a little bit of a head. But on Damari's part, the timing is incredibly precise. His departure on Monday happens to be immediately after he played in his fourth game, which by the NCAA rules, a player can participate up to 4 games and still reserve their redshirt and utilize that season as their redshirt year, protecting a crucial year of eligibility for them. And Damari, being a senior, could elect to transfer to a new program and play immediately next year after entering that January window that we talked about last pod, with that full 5th year of eligibility remaining. So, the question is this: Did a respected team captain commit a breach of, disciplinary uh, reserves, or did he use the moment as some leverage and try to maximize some sort of transfer value that he did have? Analytically, I think that this being some calculated effort to try to maintain his eligibility is probably improbable. Obviously that's in the back of their mind right now in the NIL era, but I think Damari has shown that he has been an Auburn guy. He's committed to the team, the university itself. Forget the team and the staff that it has. He has close relationships with his teammates, and he's been at the university for quite some time. So I highly doubt that he was going to try to go get that red shirt and force the hand to be moved away, to force him away from the program and go get maintain that eligibility. That's in the back of his mind for sure. But I think when he went into that office, he was probably thinking that everything was going to be hunky dory, and maybe all the conversation started out was, can I get more touches? Then it probably devolved into, I'm getting paid all this money to not get touches. I could do it somewhere else. Asked for the red shirt. Hugh obviously says no. Yada yada yada. But framing it as a disciplinary announcement, likely the coaching staff is just controlling that narrative. Hugh, we'll get into this in a minute, but Alston, I don't think committed, a sudden egregious breach of team standards, and his departure is probably more related to his spot on the depth chart and his recent game logs from the year. Last season, obviously, he was a touted backup. Everyone was really proud of him being able to stick in that room and back up Jarquez. And Damari had been the primary back at Auburn for quite some time. More so, I would say, as a power runner. Obviously, you had Brian and Jeremiah in like that more athletic role, which ultimately I think was Damari's demise in the iteration of this offense this year. But he was backing up Jarquez with Jeremiah kind of coming on, being a rising talent. And Freeze himself had praised Alston in the preseason, saying, he was better than anyone really gave him credit for. The staff, I'm sure the fans obviously will all take credit for enjoying his performances and giving him his flowers where they were due, which kind of makes the sudden dismissal by Hugh Freeze, even more jarring. But I think coming into this season, Alston thought that he was going to be RB1. He was relatively productive in his limited role early on. But once Auburn hit the rigorous SEC schedule, that role evaporated, and the staff's preference shifted basically decisively to Cobb. And in the 3 SEC games leading up to Alston's departure, which are A&M, Oklahoma, and Georgia, Alston received only 16 total carries, which on its face does seem low given Auburn's history, but Hugh Freeze's history, 16 carries, I thought was rather fair. Whether he's unhappy with it, that's subjective, but 16 carries was I thought fair, but we probably did mismanage the run game in general. So over that exact same time frame, you had Jeremiah Cobb with 24 carries, which is marginally a better rate of touches per game. Like it's not like we had a bell cow and then we had a guy that was just sitting down this guy who, mind you, was a senior captain, sitting at the bottom of the barrel on the depth chart, getting one touch in garbage time, while another guy's out here carrying 34, 35 times a game. That's not what happened. So that leads me to believe that something had devolved in the interpersonal relationships when Damari entered that room to discuss his discontent with probably that scenario. The final tipping point probably was the Georgia game. Committed to the run, obviously, for the second week in a row, as far as Hugh said in the pressers. And Cobb gets 12 carries to Alston's 7, which I personally don't believe is an egregious disparity between the two runners. 12 and 7 is absolutely kind of just like a normal split, and that's not even third down work. That's That's not third down work. It's not letting the RB1 get a breather or anything like that. Like, that's pretty much a fair split. I think he's just disappointed because he perceived his value to be a lot higher than that coming into the season. And I think that is the root cause of a lot of these problems. And certainly he was not happy with the statistical trajectory of kind of where he was heading in this Auburn offense. Losing the competitive battles at practice, probably lost the lead spot at some point after the Baylor game. Tried to maintain some sort of efficiency with his touches, but was losing touches, to the younger Cobb, game after game after game. And I don't think that he felt that he could preserve his role in the offense and see a future where he can stay or recover or be an inefficient running back. So I think instead of preserving his spot on the roster and maintaining his loyalty to Auburn and being the Auburn guy and leading the council and everything like that, he wanted to preserve his year of eligibility because he didn't see it getting better. And I honestly don't either. I don't see his predicament at Auburn having gotten any better. Jeremiah Cobb is more explosive. He's elusive. He's more or less an equally efficient downhill runner. He just has the ability to make big plays, catch balls out of the backfield. Like, he's a more dynamic back, in my opinion. I don't blame the coaching staff for running Jeremiah out there more often. And I'm actually kind of I'm impressed that they take this with a grain of salt. I'm impressed with their ability to do a balance the run game between the two of them, because they were already reducing week after week the amount of rushes we had in general. So the fact that they were even that close in terms of the touches that they were able to get is, maybe impressive is not the word, but I mean, it's interesting to say the least. But that goes right back to Damari feeling like he was slighted and he probably has the clear motivation to maintain that eligibility is to go seek a better opportunity somewhere. And unfortunately for Damari, and I made a joke in a group message that I'm in, that he'll just end up going and putting up, 45-yard performances at Coastal Carolina. I don't know that I necessarily believe that, but it is really disappointing. And that was my knee-jerk reaction to a senior captain who has been around the program and has, helped install this culture, end up just devolving into like a traitor. I mean, obviously he was disappointed, but like, you can't maintain that role and put yourself in a position to then leave or be kicked off of the team in the middle of a season, right in the thick of SEC play. So, obviously he was trying to maintain his eligibility to have an opportunity elsewhere. And the decline in usage was probably the main factor. I don't think it was a disciplinary, failure on his part, like Hugh had worded. And we kind of have to ask, why was the usage reduced? Why was Cobb preferred over Alston in almost every scenario that we saw? And when I was thinking about it, and Nick's appointed OC in January 2024. He allegedly oversees the offense that him and Hugh, let's just say, both oversee this offensive machine that they are trying to, put the cogs together on, which is based on an RPO, a physical run game, but like efficient decision making by the running back and the quarterback and things like that. And under the current coaching staff, that RPO and gap blocking scheme and power run, counter, and jet sweeps and trying to get onto the perimeter runs, like, all of those things need to be focal points in this offense. And when you get into the brutal schedule that we already have seen against, Oklahoma, A&M, not necessarily Georgia, but, there's still like dominating defensive fronts that load the box on you. The coaching decision probably came down to which back was better suited to execute these, subtle demands of the offense of which they've installed, which is that RPO kind of gap blocking scheme thing that they've got going on, that Hugh basically, invented in collaboration with the tempo offense. And, there's something to be said about running back, skill positions in tempo offense anyway. Like there's players that are certainly suited to that better than others. And that needs to come into account, or that needs to be taken into account as well when it comes down to who was getting the touches, who was having like the better opportunities, and who was the most efficient with the ball. Which is, the efficiency is probably the definitive shift to Cobb during these tough games. Like these tough matchups certainly saw Cobb getting more opportunities. And I think that it was just marginal utility was the better opportunity. Like I said, the Georgia game, it was something like five touches. And that just goes to, that's why you have a running back room. You don't just carry one running back. It goes to having the guy who can be utilized in various situations. And I think Cobb is just more dynamic. And I think Alston was ultimately unhappy with that because he thinks and believes, and I think a lot of people believe in him, that he is a good running back. He just had diminished utility in the scheme fit that Nix and Freeze wanted out of their running back room. So, really all it is a casualty of competitiveness and the roster management. And roster management, obviously, going into game day and having the most dynamic player fill the position at the top of the depth chart. But let's not kid ourselves that the day after Damari Alston's NIL money becomes, essentially available, we flip back a Shadarius Tootle, who is a highly touted defensive recruit. In the midst of all this quote unquote turmoil, we are able to go resecure a highly rated recruit. And I don't think that it is a coincidence that it just so happened to be essentially after Damari Alston walks away from the benefit of his NIL deals that he had lined up with the collective. So it's roster management in the sense that what running back is going to be able to get us the most yards on the most variety of plays, but it's also roster management in the sense of retention and recruiting. What can you do with the money allocated to you? Who can you put into place? And it's a business decision. Maybe Hugh Freeze looked at it that way as well when he said, "No way am I giving a red shirt to a senior captain in the middle of the season. You can leave this program." And then he does, and he gives up probably one of the most lucrative NIL deals on the team because prior to the season starting, he was RB1, or he was projected to be, and he probably got paid. He probably got paid with that in mind. So that kind of brings us back to Hugh Freeze, though, making the decision in the room with Alston. His statement after the fact about Alston failing to meet standards. Why use that kind of language? Especially, when I think a lot of people that understand the team dynamics of sport, and have seen this program go through all kinds of different, turmoil, success, changes, call it whatever you want to. But, it's normal for players to outcompete other players. And sometimes you saw it with all the guys that Harsin had on the roster compared to the guys that Freeze put on the roster. You just become a casualty of competition. And I don't know why Hugh Freeze got up there. Maybe because it was a fresh, quote unquote altercation. But Hugh Freeze gets up there and basically blames Damari 100% for not meeting these standards. And that's very weird. That was very weird to me. But, in college athletics, those quote unquote standards, they're like, that's just a euphemism. It allows Hugh or any coach to enforce like authority and control, and then also control the narrative. So especially for a coach like Hugh Freeze, who had to resign from Ole Miss after those NCAA violations of personal misconduct were brought to light. They vacated 27 wins. And I think that he has kind of an ulterior motive to maintain his image, the program of which he is the leader of, its image, and then obviously probably wants to come across as having a strict adherence to institutional policy, or whatever that is, for whatever that's worth, because I've seen a lot of people on socials talk about Hugh Freeze isn't meeting the standards of Auburn football's program anyway. Like, what are you talking about? Damari Alston didn't. You didn't either. So, I mean, that's an interesting take on it. But, I really wish that they would have gotten together and thought about what their messaging was going to be, because, the way that he phrased it frames it as Alston's exit was a dismissal for failing to meet these standards, which in the moment Freeze accomplishes protecting the program's image from the optics of someone quitting midseason, especially a captain. He asserts the disciplinary authority that, other players, sending a stern message to other players, essentially, reminding the remaining roster that prioritizing personal gain in this NIL era will more than likely result in a coach dictating what happens with you, and eliminating maybe the perceived leverage that a guy with a really stout NIL deal, might think he has over the team. And then, he avoids the accusations of losing control of the locker room. In the moment, I absolutely think that everyone thought that he has lost control of the locker room. But in the moment, he probably thinks that he's controlling that narrative and is kind of flipping his past history on its head, being like, no, this time we got it. Which obviously I think everyone can agree, the fallout from this on social media and commentary and in various mediums of media is just like, that probably was not how the message was taken. But team standards certainly being weaponized by Freeze at the presser was interesting. And it seems to me that once Damari signaled his intent to utilize the 4-game redshirt rule and depart, Freeze then takes the opportunity to leverage, what is potentially a weakness, considered a weakness because everyone thinks the players have so much power. And to the credit of maybe like what their plan was, is I said on a pod the other day, you've got to take control back from these players who think that they run the show. Now, that's not a disrespect to players that get paid well in terms of like their NIL deals or whatever deals they have lined up. And, it obviously college football has changed a little bit, but it's still amateurism. And I think Hugh Freeze may be one of the, inadvertently, because I don't even want to give him that much credit for being this savvy right now, but he might have in the moment been like, we are going to out leverage you. We're the ones paying you. You have all this money and you think you have this power. We're going to flip that right back on you. And we're going to regain some, strength from the institution and maybe implement some sort of disciplinary action here that completely stonewalled Damari's, prayer for or whatever relief he was seeking. But as the thing unfolded yesterday morning, that message was probably lost via some discontent by the online Auburn fan base. People going straight to Cohen about it and lines of questioning that he had to face yesterday. And then, most importantly, the social media commentary by the former players and even the current players that obviously supported Damari, outwardly. And I think that I think that it's important to note that these kids still have, going back to losing the locker room, these kids still have to, these kids are preparing for Mizzou this week. Like, yesterday was an unfortunate circumstance, and they certainly are going to miss their friend. But they got to put their nose back to the grindstone and let the powers that be figure out whatever it is that needs to be figured out. But day-to-day operation in that facility can't change because Damari left, which is probably one of the reasons, if not the biggest reason, that Hugh Freeze wanted to retake control of this narrative and not even give Damari the chance to say maintain the NIL deal or get more touches or whatever. He just put his foot down on it. So for what that's worth, whatever that's worth, that's what happened. And we will find out, more and more of the details about what happened. But it seems to me that Damari walked in there discontent with how things were going, wanted a red shirt, but wanted to maintain his NIL deal. And you can't get paid. You really can't. We can't afford to pay players that aren't playing, especially when you're volunteering to not play and it's not medically, it's not a medical red shirt. It's not. And again, let me clarify this too. Like, it is not the same thing that's happening with Ashton Daniels. Ashton Daniels is a grad student backup quarterback, not a captain, no minutes, yada yada yada. Damari Alston is in a very peculiar predicament here because he was a elected captain, senior player, veteran Auburn player, not a transfer, none of that stuff. So like you can't, the two things aren't akin to each other. You can't compare them really. But Damari leaving, whether or not it was good for the NIL fund, whether or not it was good for the locker room is, more or less irrelevant, because you've got to think about, like I said, preparing for Missouri to come to town. What's the rotation look like? And I actually don't think that Damari leaving has that big of an impact on what the running back room looks like in general. I mean, it's not as experienced, but I would not call it thin by any means. In Damari's eyes, we're already relying on Cobb anyway, so just rely on him more in actuality when you go throughout these games. Accelerate the development of Henderson and Mapson, and then look where you can look and see where you can get them over the next couple of weeks and see if they can't rotate in. And no one's even saying handle the same amount of work that Damari was, because obviously Damari didn't think it was enough, so it'd be easy enough for these younger guys to handle. And then go get Darrell healthy. I'm not sure where he's at right now. I think the outlook on that, like bursitis or whatever it was, is like 4 to 6 weeks. So, I mean, he's coming up on a window to return. And, that Darrell Robinson and Damari Alston are similar running backs, in my opinion. So you just put him in the void, the small void that was left open by Damari, and you've got a running back room that is still palatable and competitive. But accelerate Darrell's rehab and get him back into the game plan. And I think that you don't really miss a stride as far as the running back room goes. I mean, the offense itself is already absolute shit in the second half anyway. So you might as well, stick to your guns and see if, you can just get this running back room led by Jeremiah Cobb anyway. If he is truly the most dynamic back, then you better trot him out there in as many scenarios as you can, because he's the one that's going to go make a play. And we better start winning some games. We better start winning some second halves, especially going into the rest of the season, because we're still staring at 8-4, maybe. But you got to be able to close the game out. And I'm not necessarily sure that Damari Alston was moving the needle all too much either way. So it's a loss because he was a good culture guy. But when you're walking into the coach's office, I'm not saying he did this. You're walking into coach's office saying, I'm RB2, I want more touches, I want him, and keep paying me. Maybe he wasn't that great of a culture guy the last few weeks anyway, which my initial thought on all of this was, you do not give the red shirt to that kid that is a senior captain, because all he gets to do for the rest of the season is hang around the facility and potentially sulk and become a cancer. I'm not saying that Damari would do this, but you give the red shirt to the kid that's just you don't let someone complain their way into this red shirt, because they can just go hang around the facility and start maybe becoming a cancer on some of these younger guys. And wait until the wave of the next generation of these players. You got 32 dudes coming up to you being asking for something just as ridiculous as this, and that's where you are. But it's unfortunate, and I think that the separation is a lot more sophisticated than people think. But it definitely has something to do with the competitive pressure, strategic NIL action, maybe on Damari's part, definitely on the administration's part, and maybe implementing some more authority over the team than maybe there had been in the past. the past season or the past couple years. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that, a senior captain was trying to make a play on the staff, maybe to just his benefit to get this red shirt mid-season while, also expecting to maintain his NIL opportunity. And on the flip side of the coin, it's just as disappointing on how the staff handled it, how Freeze handled it. You should have probably taken the time prior to the presser to align on the messaging and be a lot more careful with how they portrayed the internal affairs. And the media, whether or not they're Auburn biased media, doesn't really matter. Like their job as journalists is to go pick up on that, no matter what Hugh Freeze said. And if there's a negative connotation that can be spun to it, guess what? That gets clicks, and that's a lot more interesting than a handshake deal that they all just separated and that no one cares about it, and that it's not gonna lead to a coaching search and kids. There's gonna be a wave of kids transferring out of the program and yada yada yada. That's the narrative that got picked up, of course. But they should have been a lot more careful with how they did it, and maybe for the time being not even address it, because candidly at the Monday presser, we're talking about last week, you might as well just save that for when you're ready to make a statement. And maybe you repair the relationship to some extent and you make a joint statement and everyone parts ways, and you do save some face with the locker room guys that were close to Damari. But lines of questioning directed at Freeze and Cohen, same day as the news was breaking, is probably too quick of a turnaround for the staff to deal with all that well. And when Freeze is his own PR guy, it doesn't get much worse sometimes, because he just refuses to not address things, which he prides himself on telling the truth, but you don't have to tell everyone everything all the time, whether it's truthful or not. So ultimately I'm just disappointed in all the parties involved. And as for what it's worth, as a former athlete who held leadership roles and a current coach, my take on it is that you cannot put yourself in the position that Damari did, because he held a very unique position on the team. Like, he wasn't a perennial practice squad guy. Like, this was not a new face that got buried on the roster after transferring in. Like, this was a guy who was a steady member of this roster for the last couple years, wanted more playing time, but that's just not how depth charts work. And position competitions don't work that way. Like, Damari just got outplayed, it seems like to me, and was ultimately, dismissed, whether that be voluntarily or involuntarily. And I thought that was a terrible look for him. And I think it's a terrible look, by affiliation through his roles on the team as, leadership council or culture council and a captain and in a leadership position. Like, that's also terrible optics for Auburn and Hugh, which, take that for what it's worth. But I kind of put the onus on Damari right now for putting himself in that position. And I'm not saying a player needs to sit there all year and be happy with not being as involved as they think they should be. But that's how the sport works. And if you really think a coach is going to get manhandled by one kid that's in a room full of other viable, running backs in this instance, you're probably also a little naive, because it's in Hugh's best interest to cut that guy out of the team as fast as he can. Whether or not he loses a couple locker room guys, a kid, and I'm not saying Damari Alston is this kid, but like a kid like that whose expectations are so much higher than his on-field performance calls for, then that kid could become a cancer to the locker room, and he could start dissuading a lot of motivation for kids that are still trying to like I put their nose down and get on with the season and see if they can't turn things around. That's like a boat dragging anchor. It's not all that efficient. It slows you down, and you gotta cut that rope, and you gotta start cruising along. And that's really what I think about all that. I think that I think that the opportunity that Damari had to get his touches expired. I think that it was bad timing right after the UGA lost. It was definitely bad optics on Hugh's part to phrase it that way. It made Damari look bad. Damari, probably didn't necessarily deserve that, but he also didn't probably deserve what he was asking for either. So it's a really tough situation to be in. I really wish the university had a better grasp on it yesterday, and got their messaging aligned to minimize the damage that was caused by it, because it does not look good for any parties involved, and that's unfortunate. And you know what? Maybe we'll have more to say about it as more things come out. But let's get on to our early week segment, Tigers on the Prowl. We've got a lot of sports returning to campus this week, and a lot of sports on the road. So Tuesday, October 14th, you're going to see women's tennis hosting the ITA Southern Regional Championships. Those games are free. Wednesday is going to have a continuation of the ITA Southern Regional Championships. Volleyball will be at Kentucky on Wednesday. You can watch that on ESPN SEC Network. Men's basketball will have an exhibition game against Oklahoma State at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. That is not something that you can view, but I am sure that Stephen Pearl and anyone that is able to be on site there is going to have a lot of hopefully good material coming out of that, and give us Auburn fans something to look forward to as basketball season quickly approaches. Thursday is soccer. The women's soccer team has Oklahoma at 6:30 p.m. Central. Breast cancer awareness bucket hat giveaway and the Nike Air Force One raffle if you're going to be there in person. If not, you can watch on ESPN SEC Network. That brings us to Friday. Friday, Auburn's women golf team is in Chapel Hill, North Carolina at the Finley Golf Club for the Ruth's Chris Tar Heel Invitational. I believe they will play the Invitational Friday through Sunday. Swim and dive will be in Atlanta at Georgia Tech for the dual meet tournament. The first matchup Auburn has is with Minnesota. The second matchup is TBD currently, but they will take on the Gophers Friday morning in the pools. Cross country will be going up to T-Town in Tuscaloosa for the Crimson Classic, and equestrian hosts Barry for the annual breast cancer awareness meet. Pink inflatable hobby horse giveaways if you're able to make it in person, or if you are out of town and you want to tune in, you can watch that on ESPN SEC Network as well. Softball is hosting Chipola State, probably Chippewa, I don't know, something like that. Chippewa State College or Chippewa College. They are at home, and that will be an intro to the doubleheader that they will have on Sunday. Saturday, Auburn football brings number 16 Missouri to town. That is a 7:45 Eastern, 6:45 Central kickoff, and the university wants a power stripe for that. I am all for coordinating colors to a game, but not when you're 0-3 in the conference and you have got a potential coaching search on the horizon. Let's just start winning games and let fans show up wearing whatever they want. If they want to wear paper bags on their heads and we win a game, fine with me. Like I said, we'll do a preview of that later this week, but that'll be an interesting game. I think Missouri's falling off, and Auburn, if they can just do anything in any second quarter, probably is on the come up, but not currently on the come up. Sunday, women's golf continues, like I said, at the Ruth's Chris Tar Heel Invitational up in North Carolina. Men's golf will be on the way to Wilmington, North Carolina at Eagle Point Golf Club for round 1 of the Williams Cup. That will be round 1, and that's going to continue into Tuesday, I believe. I'm not sure that you can tune into that on the streaming apps, but I did see somewhere that there was a match overview that is hosted by by them. I think you can live stream it. It's just not on the big ones. You're gonna have to Google that one and go to the live match coverage and get your video feed from there. If there is no video feed, you gotta go get your stats. Watch Jackson Coyven rise in the leaderboards at the Williams Cup. Softball, like I alluded to earlier, brings Northwest Florida State to town for a noon game. That is a doubleheader with Georgia Southern coming in at 2:30 Central the same day. Volleyball will again be out on the road. They are going to Knoxville at Tennessee for a matchup with the number 16 Vols. Auburn volleyball is still receiving votes for a top 25 ranking. Haven't got it yet. But soccer also will round out the Tigers on the Prowl segment. The soccer team kicks off Sunday at 4 Central in Athens against number 22 Georgia for another pivotal SEC matchup. Hopefully the girls can leave there with 3 points in their favor and take down number 22 Georgia in lieu of the football team not being able to do the same. So that is what is going on around the Plains this weekend. That is some coverage on the Damari Alston, happenings, incident, however you want to say it, that unfolded yesterday. And we will be back tomorrow with a preview of the Missouri-Auburn game. And a little bit more info on some of the happenings with the sports that will be on campus this week. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Things are unrolling. Things are on a roll. As always, War Eagle and stay on a roll.